Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of 3Advisors and a Business. I'm Sidney Wayman here with Deidre Mercedes, someone with two first names. So you kind of like get caught trying to figure out which one to say first.
I answer to both. It's fine.
And BJ Handel.
Hi
Hello,
there.
guys. How are you today?
Good.
I'm good. How are
So
you?
today we're going to have a conversation about Riverstone Landscaping Services, a commercial landscaping and property maintenance company that is kind of experiencing growth, but having significant growing pains. Problems include cash shortages, reliance on credit lines, delayed receivables, and seasonal cash swings, which to me, a lot of this would be expected considering the nature of their business, right? I don't know. For me, landscaping is seasonal. I guess property maintenance, depending on what segment of the property maintenance business they are more heavily involved in, whether it's the outdoor lawns maintenance, that kind of thing, or whether it also includes the indoor, keeping up the plants, that kind of thing, going and watering the plants, that would be year round. But a lot of the maintenance stuff would be more seasonal. And then unless, of course, they do snow removal, which, if they're in the Northeast or, the North, the Midwest, upper Midwest, Colorado, sections of Colorado, yeah, that could be an interesting business. But by and large, when I hear landscaping, I'm thinking of lawns and outdoor greenery maintenance. But anyway, the company does about 2.8 million, and the owner thinks that he could probably grow much larger and probably reach the $5 million mark. But right now, he seems to be stuck, depending on his credit lines, experiencing cash shortages, not getting paid timely on his receivables, and not figuring out or hasn't figured out a way to deal with this seasonal cash swing. So let's delve in and see what you guys think the owner might do to correct the situation. First, I guess by you guys kind of like sharing some of your insights on what might he be doing wrong, or what the business might be doing wrong.
I think what they're having a great deal of problem with is cash flow, and it's really around planning. They don't seem to be doing much in operational planning, and they're really not doing much in the way of cash flow planning. So the owner is basically saying, we have a growing business, we're doing well, except that I'm always concerned about meeting payroll. That's a real that's a real problem. They're not planning well for having this kind of a problem, and it really needs to be tackled. There's multiple phases of this that need to be done, but the largest, simplest one I see is the planning is very poor. The planning around cash flow is bad, and there just needs to be structure to see that doesn't occur.
All right, so be a little more specific. Like what like if you were sitting down with the owner, what would be some of the specific things you would suggest he do to get a better handle on this cash flow? Well,
one of the things they have to do is get a better handle on their accounts receivable. It's currently taking them 60 to 90 days to get money in, and it should not take that long to do it. And we need to understand what kind of terms they're giving. Are their clients being given that 60-day terms? Are they collecting slowly, or are they simply giving terms away that are not helping their business and putting them in a problem? And
yeah, I would think. Yeah, I would think though that the terms aren't 60 days, because if the terms were 60 days, they wouldn't be saying.
I would agree that they shouldn't be, but I have also seen that, and so that it's something that is at least worth knowing. We don't have the exact information, so to talk to him, the first thing you'd want to find out is what are they giving people? How are they structuring contracts for it?
Right. No, I agree with you, but I think because they say delayed receivables, I'm assuming
Yeah.
that the receivables are coming in
Yeah.
beyond the terms they said. So, I mean, I definitely think, I guess my point would be that I don't think they're giving, 60-day terms or 90-day terms. I think, their customers are just not
Again,
paying.
I don't know exactly
I
what it is
think
they
that-
agree, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what's going on? What I saw is that they have almost $1 million tied up
Yeah.
in accounts receivables, and it says 60 to 90 days. Meaning, to me, what I took away from that is that they're taking, the company is taking that long
Yeah.
to get this money. So it, again, like you said, we don't know what the terms are, and it could be that they're different with every customer. And so when you have that kind of situation, and you have, they defined those invoicing timelines? Are they consistent? Are they just they're not enforcing them? And of course, if it's it's a small business, and they're probably busy doing landscaping, so they're just trying to get the jobs done, but they're not putting enough emphasis on collecting their money. So they need to definitely be more progressive, I guess, with their billing milestones. They need to make sure that they have good communication. Do we know what the customer? We don't know what the customer payout terms are. Are they even embedded in a contract? Do we
So
know?
I don't know. I mean, I guess when I read the point of view that the owner shares, I don't think that they're offering 60 to 90-day terms.
No, I don't.
be-
No, and I'm not
I
even
don't
saying
know.
that. What I'm saying is,
It's possible, but I doubt it. But what they're not doing is collecting it.
Right.
collecting, right?
Even if they're
Exactly,
not doing it
exactly.
one
Right,
way,
there's-
shape, form, or another, they are allowing their receivables to run that long, and they
that's
should.
right.
And it's a question now of what are the terms, how are you structuring it, and how are you collecting it? How do you go about it?
And how are you even
They're
capturing?
simply not getting the money in that they need to have in.
Yeah, and how are you even capturing? Are they like, does somebody not pay for 90 days, for 60 days or 30 days, and somebody goes, oh, wait a minute, we should have this much money based on what our performance, and do they even know? So we don't know. There's a whole lot that we don't know about this particular process, but some ways that they need some more procedures. They need more customer communication, perhaps. They definitely need to tighten up their, tighten up their contracts, because if the customer feels like, I don't have to pay, then, and nobody's calling them until the company is saying, sure, it'd be nice if we could fix one of these lawnmowers. No, okay, let's see if we can collect some money, right? I mean, we don't know how this is happening, right?
Mhm.
Do they even know? Do they can in a meeting, could somebody, like you say, BJ, if you're planning well, somebody should be able to walk up to you at any point in time and say, how much money are we out? And somebody, and that person who's responsible for that should be able to quote a number very, very quickly, and you should be able to go after that. So, like you said, there's not just planning, but the process to ensure that your customers are adhering to whatever the terms and conditions may be. Needs to be.
So what are some specific suggestions in terms of credit terms or terms of sale? What would you?
Are you talking to me?
Both of you, 2%, 10.
Generally, normally we try and keep it within 30 days in terms of having, you wouldn't want to give terms more than that 30. But I don't
But
know
I guess my thing would be, right, I'm not sure, like you said, we don't really know what their terms are.
Right.
We kind of think it's definitely not 60 to 90, but it could be 30, it could be 45. We don't really know. But I guess the issue is that they're trying to accelerate the collection of cash, right? So to just say, net 30, I think that's what most companies do. And generally speaking, some companies might pay net 30. I know large companies will definitely tend to pay within those kinds of terms. But, smaller companies may not, right? They might try to extend you 45, and I guess in this case, they 60 or 90 days. So even if you say 30 days, would that necessarily lead people to pay in 30 days? Or
No.
is there a way you can offer some kind of inducement to cause companies to pay within your terms?
So I have a suggestion. And it's a small company. I don't know, but they might want to start trying to get their money up front in different ways. Like, for instance, say, okay, for a year, we will do this for you, and we'll be here every other week, or whatever those terms are. And this is going to cost you on a yearly basis this much money. So you'll be getting paid the month before. Maybe there's a setup fee for the program, and then you're getting paid the month before. If you don't get your money the month before, then you don't show up.
Yeah, that's a good idea. However,
Just a suggestion.
you ain't the only landscaping company around now.
But who said that that won't work? If it doesn't work,
Well, I didn't say it won't work, but
So
No, all I'm saying is
you're
it's-
asking me to put money up front. Suppose I pay you, and 2 days later or 3 days later, you go out of business for some reason. I
all
don't
I'm
know.
saying is that could be a way. Like, for instance, if you have a customer that is consistently, you don't want to come to them and say, hey, we're going to drop you. It's a suggestion to say to them, hey, would this program work for you? We've been working together for 5 years, but this is another program that we might be able to offer. It's just a suggestion. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
That
I
would be a
guess
good
I
way
could
to
see
do it.
that in certain
You could also do
situations,
something, Sydney, to what she said, what you can offer them. You can do things like offer 1% for 10 days. And basically say, I will give you a percentage reduction if I can get the money in sooner. So there
Right.
is at least some reason to say to a person, I want you to pay more. I mean, look, I had a very large retailer that we had 30-day terms with, that on a good day, they didn't pay anything close to 30 days. And you had to argue and get on the phone and push people. And that was just part of doing business. But you had to be aggressive about your collections. Because,
Yeah, but you said you gave them 30-day terms, but
and they still didn't pay in 30 days. It didn't matter how much terms you gave them. It was really, they could work with your money unless you pushed them.
Right.
And that was really something that was, how do you manage your organization so that you're getting out of customers what the terms that you actually give them. It's very important to do that. And that's not a simple thing to do.
And then who's that could be that's another question. You could find a lot of ways to incentivize people. Most of the time, it's in contracts that if you're late, you're going to get a charge. You're going to get a charge for a late payment. I mean, that's with anything, mortgages and credit cards and anything. So it's not so much as an incentive as, it's negative reinforcement, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. But if I knew I was going to get another $40 charge on top of a $400 bill, I would be a little quicker to pay it. But these are just suggestions. You could go down the line and suggest how they could do it, since we don't know, we don't have the benefit of understanding how they're doing this. We already know they're not planning. We already know that, you got stuff out there 30, 60, 90 days, and you don't have a way to collect your money except to make a couple of phone calls and wait till it happens. We don't know what's going on. And sometimes your accounting person is not necessarily the person who should be making these phone calls, because these are sensitive phone calls. Is that, it's calling, you're collecting a debt at that point, but if they already have a strain on their system, they certainly don't want to turn a 60, 90-day bill over to a collection agency. But they might want to have somebody with a kind tone asking for money. I've seen that situation before where somebody, it was an account. I say that because the person who was calling for money was not nice.
Yeah.
And then they handed it over to somebody who was nice, and the money started coming in very quickly. And it seemed to have just been a personality problem.
Yeah, that's a good cop, bad cop. A lot of people play that game.
It was effective.
No, it's a work. It definitely, it definitely works. I think you guys hit on quite a few of the issues here, right? And I think, I think we could say for sure that they need to better manage the collection process. And that would include coming up with some kind of, credit terms that they could offer, where they incentivize early payment by offering 1%, 2%, 3% if they pay within 10 days, balance due in 30, and then tack on a late payment fee of 1% of invoice amount for each month or period of a month that the payment is late. A lot of times most companies won't pay that, but then maybe what they could do is cut off the service, right? At some point, not every customer is a good customer, so maybe sometimes you have to walk away. But I think those two things for sure. And then the third part would be, what BJ was saying is like, you can't just let people not pay you. At some point, you have to pick up the phone, right? And whether it's going to be the nice guy that seems to get the job done, as Mercedes said, or whether it's the bad guy who can ruffle feathers and piss people off, somebody has to make the phone call. So I think you guys hit on some really interesting points and suggestions that the company could follow to deal with, to deal with the collection problem. I guess some of the other problems, though, and oddly enough, all of these problems, they have a cash shortage. Well, why do they have the cash shortage? Well, because they're not collecting their receivables, right?
Mhm.
They're reliant on credit lines. Well, why are they relying on credit lines? Why? Because their customers aren't paying, right? And then seasonal cash swings. Right now, the seasonal cash swings is probably something that may not be directly related to the payment terms, but the other problems, cash shortages and reliance on credit lines, those two issues are directly related to the delayed receivables, in my opinion, right? So if they could start collecting their receivables, they may not have a cash shortage. And if they don't have a cash shortage, they may not need to rely on their credit lines. But what are your suggestions about the seasonal cash swings, right? What do you guys? What are some solutions that you might come up with for the company to deal with their seasonal cash swings?
You
Well,
understand a little bit more about, to go through this and look at what is the seasonality of it, the degree to which it is. My understanding of this is that there was no cash flow planning, which makes it really hard to say, how you're going to do this specifically. But from a seasonality point of view, I don't know that you're going to change the seasonality of it dramatically as much as you can change how well you're planned for the fact that it is a seasonal business and the fact that you can manage the business in a way that will get you better results. So the things like being worried about whether you're going to have enough cash to make to make your payroll, that shouldn't be something you should end up doing or come up suddenly. All of that's something that you kind of have to deal with on a regular basis. But frankly, Sydney, it's a lot of planning. To me, it's looking at what the planning basis is and then carrying that forward. Anybody have any suggestions on seasonality? That would be great.
I mean, first of all, do we know where this company is?
Sounds like one of them companies out in California somewhere, where the sun's always shining. Actually, I don't know if it's in California. Well, if it's in Southern California, the business wouldn't be that seasonal because
Not at all.
Yes. So we can say that we don't know where it is, but the fact that it's seasonal and most of the revenue occurs in the spring and summer, they are probably somewhere,
I'd say
you
East
know,
Coast.
mid-Atlantic, New
There are
England,
so I
the
think one of the
Midwest.
things, yeah, one of the things that I would do if it was that big of a deal, outside of what you're talking about, BJ, you got 5 months out of the year that are just you're not going to be outside, you're not going to be landscaping. However, there's still some months on the end there, especially in the fall when you've got leaves falling, and that could be just another service, which it probably is. I know that's a high service on the East Coast. Service, you know, um, people need leaves. Leaves have to be swept up because while the leaves are falling, and then it gets damp, it's a slip and fall situation if you're not taking up the leaves. But then, maybe they need a business development person inside that can go out, and for those cold months, there's a lot of businesses that still have live plants indoors. There's large companies that they need that kind of care for indoor plants, and you still need to do a lot of cleanup on like food factories. I mean, it's a business development thing where you have to go out there and find those areas where you can do more environmentally sound stuff during those months when you're not actually trimming bushes.
So you're suggesting is that they go out, pardon me, they go out and expand their revenue base by finding services they could offer, pardon me, in the fall and winter. Right. That's a good idea. I think that's a good idea. I guess the other thing that's kind of interesting, and I would like to spend more time speaking with the owner. They mentioned how their labor costs, seem to be kind of constant throughout the year. I remember there were times like a lot of the big auto manufacturers and their suppliers would be seasonal, right? Or would their activity would follow, pardon me, the business cycle, pardon me. And so at points in time when we were heading into a recession or a recession was occurring and nobody was buying cars, they would lay off a bunch of people, right? And people would be laid off. They could go get unemployment insurance, right? Then when things picked up again, they would bring the people back. I'm wondering whether the owner could possibly lay off his workforce in the fall, right? And bring them back in the spring. And during the fall, they could collect unemployment, which is not comparable in terms of magnitude of what their salary would be, but it is something that they could get. And I don't know what the rules of unemployment insurance are. I don't know if you could hit it, once a year, or not. Whether there are any kind of limitations on how often, how frequently a company could lay off its workers and have them hit the thing. But I guess I'm not quite sure how they're managing their costs. Some things are fixed, but it would seem labor would be something that they might be able to reduce during those slow periods. Might raise
I
some other
also,
issues like good employees leaving because they want to work
right,
full time year
that's
round.
a
Um,
thing.
yeah, so
Now there's another thing that they got a lot of what's that number? They have a huge number. Maintenance, something about maintenance. So it looks like they're spending an awful lot of money. So I mean, listen, maybe they need to train some of these people during those off season months to do preventive maintenance on their maybe they already have people who are already trained that can do some preventive maintenance on their equipment, because they seem to be spending an awful lot of money on equipment maintenance. And so use the off season for to get things back up and running, which you might be able to offset some of that, when the season does start and things are crashing and burning. Now you have even more costs because everything is now everything is an emergency. So that comes back into what BJ was talking about in terms of planning. And and that there's a lot of statistics involved with that. Do you know which one of your machines are crashing and burning, every Monday? Do you know what your critical parts are? Do you know, are you dealing with, do you have preventive maintenance plans? There's a reason why those maintenance costs are so high. I think that's a pretty high number. So maybe they can kind of turn that labor into something else for a few months if they have people who can do that for the same money. Just switch over to the maintenance side or the preventive maintenance side or whatever.
So I mean, definitely something they could pursue. The other thing, though, I think that the owner should be happy about is that they have EBITDA of 330,000, so they can cover their expenses, right? I mean, even if they don't do any of the things we're suggesting, they generate enough cash flow to cover their expenses, right? So that seasonality is a major problem gets back to the other issues we talked about, which is cash flow management, right? And making sure people can pay them on a timely basis, right? Because if the cash comes in, if they collect the cash from their revenues, they can pay their bills, right? They have 330,000 in cash flow. So this problem gets back to cash flow management. To me, I think it kind of like gets back to cash flow management.
That makes sense. And what you were saying before, Sydney, about working on the size of the labor force that they have makes a great deal of sense. I mean, it shows that they have a landscaping crew of 16 people, which is essentially having a lot of people that you have maybe 6 or 7 months a year, is what most of their work is. So do you really need to be staffed up to be at your highest or at your peak when, and you maybe have half a year that you actually need that for? So yeah, that's another thing that you can look at to see how can you reduce costs. And Mercedes, what you were saying simply about, it is one thing to reduce the costs. It's also another thing to look at what business development can you do to look at how do you get to be more than a 6-month business? How do you get to be a business that is dealing with the needs of landscaping over the months that you're not your busiest? So, but when you put it all together, it's a good package to put to someone.
Yeah. And it's a good opportunity for business expansion, but then you have to deal with business expansion means, additional training. It might mean additional people, a lot of things, but you have the time because you have this off season. And then it, to make all those things happen, but then it goes right back to what you were saying in the first place, BJ, because then you have to that's a completely different, you're planning for growth. You're planning for a different job, a different business opportunity. You're planning to make sure, and then you still need your legal and administrative to step up, because I think maybe it's the biggest thing. We keep coming back to it, getting that money in. You know, that's a 90 days is a long time for money to be out.
Yes, it is. And I
Sure
think
is.
the management team,
Even though,
12 months a year, and you're not doing a huge amount of business in a lot of it, there's a lot of time to do planning for this. There's a lot of time to do cash flow management, to look at how that's going to be. Yeah, the people are getting paid in the management side of this, and they can start to look at, what is this going to look like, so that you don't have this happen to them when you get into the middle of their season.
Mhm.
yeah, it reminds me, I worked in the credit area for a large chemical company, but they sold the stuff that, you have a fishing rod and the thing the hook is on, the string. I don't know what that stuff is called. The string, the rod, the string that the hook is on, and you could reel it in or whatever. But anyway, we did a lot of business. They sold a lot to sporting goods stores or whatever, and they had terms of like what, 6 or 7 months, because that's what the business required. That's what the industry required. A lot of those companies would, retailers would load up on that stuff, but it would take 6 or 7 months for them to eventually sell out and collect the cash flow. So it was kind of strange. It was kind of odd. I think it was so odd that the company sold that business and got out of it, because it was kind of rough. Excuse me. So the seasonal cash flow pressure, cash is locked up in receivables. I think the other thing, the other issue that the company was trying to deal with was their heavy reliance on credit, which they're going to have to rely on credit because they're not collecting their cash flow, right? So the only thing they could do if they can't increase their cash flow is maybe go out and raise some equity. But, and by raising equity, I mean the owner will probably have to take some time to, we'll probably have to put more money into the business, because I don't know if they'd be able to go out and raise actual equity. It's a relatively small company, and I don't think their profitability or growth would entice angel investors or other types of investors to put money into it. So it'd have to be family and friends or the owner coming up with some additional cash. But until they start collecting their cash, they're going to be reliant on credit, right?
Yeah.
So not a whole lot they could do. I guess, and I don't know if I would suggest that, because if their borrowing needs are tied to the operations, it wouldn't make sense for them to go long on a longer term, like 5-year loan.
Yeah.
To add cash and add financial flexibility, because that's not what they need. They need something to finance operations. So at best, what they might try to do is increase their credit line if the current limit isn't sufficient. But the number one thing for this company is to figure out a way to accelerate the payment of their receivables, like induce their customers to pay them on a more timely fashion.
Yeah. I would say that's the biggest thing.
Me too.
Yeah. So they gotta tighten up those contracts or agreements or handshakes or whatever it is they're doing.
So the other issues, there were some other issues that are not directly related to cash, or maybe they are. But one of the problems the owner kind of mentioned that he's dealing with was the job scheduling was inconsistent across crews, and that the service quality varied by crew teams, by the teams. And there was no standardized workflow for recurring contracts. And in a weird kind of way, that might partly explain why people take their time to pay them. Right? Because if you're not giving me, if there's no standardized workflow for my recurring contracts for my service, and I'm using you throughout the year, and you come up, you show up, every other month when my grass needs to be cut every month. If you're not coming in and watering the plants, once a month as required, then why am I going to pay you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So gets back to, I think both of you raised that point. They need to look at their contracts. I think Mercedes, you were saying they need to definitely look at their contracts and see what their contracts say. But at the same time, they need to look at their contracts and see whether they are providing the service that they agreed to provide in their contracts. Right?
So I'm gonna add a little bit more to that, because when you have inconsistency, everybody's doing the same job. One person cuts grass better than the other person cuts grass, and that gets back into training. I had mentioned, when you have that off season, you might want to start training people and say, hey, this, what are you doing differently? And which the first thing that has to be done is looking at the customer perception. So you have to do customer satisfaction surveys. You have to somebody needs to be making a phone call. There needs to be a 2-question survey or something to find out what's going on. Does a customer find that, in January, somebody was there, and then somebody was there in February, and the grass wasn't cut the same way, the service was different. And then who did those 2 services? Or do you know who's on your crews? But if you go back to contract review, and you're not just saying, oh, we're going to come out, we're going to cut your grass, we're going to trim your bushes, but is somebody actually going out, looking at the environment and doing a full analysis of what needs to be done and what the customer wants, and then coming back to the organization and saying, let's put the team together to say, this is what these people need. Who's the best person to do this? And having a consistent person going to that site, so that there's only 1 or 2 people who know that particular site. So if you have a situation where you have to, first of all, not get rid of, but if you put tighter constraints on your billing, so that you might lose people, as you said, Sydney. If you come in there and start talking about, well, we're gonna need you to start paying up front because you don't seem to want to pay, so, and you might lose that customer. But if you're going back out there with that business development person and then bringing in new customers, then now you can charge maybe a little bit extra, because you're doing a full service contract review, analysis, assessment, and now you're putting the right people in the right places so that you can have a different service. You're coming out of it with a different type of service. So yeah. Did that make sense? I felt like I went around the horn on that one.
That's okay.
That made sense. That actually makes a great deal of sense. They
Yeah.
really do need to be more standardized in how they provide for their services. And I would just add one other thing, Sydney, when it came to money, I would also like to understand, how are they paying their bills? Are they paying their bills way faster than they may need to? I don't know that, but I think
It could be that's an aspect of the credit. That
Yeah.
could be a credit aspect.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's just things that you can do to help cash flow, that you kind of need to look at all of the different parts of the business to say, to put them all together, to say, how do we make all of this work, as opposed to this with us, and then we'll just not look at this one. So that's another thing to look at.
Which goes right back
Yeah.
to your original, there's a lot of planning that needs to be done in this organization.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of operational changes that they need to, in their workforce, in the way they do billing, in the way they get business, certainly the way they retain their customers. And then somebody has to make a smart decision someplace, or a hard decision, I should say, about which one of these customers can we lose. You know, as small as I am, as my business has been, I've had to look at customers, and I have had to say, you know what, I can't afford this one. I can't afford this one anymore. I can't afford that one. And I've had to write a letter. Can't do it. Can't do it anymore.
So you wrote a letter? You didn't call them?
Well,
That's like
I
sending
actually-
a text.
I actually
text.
no. I actually, you know, when you have, for me, when you have customers like that, you tell them first, and they don't listen, and they keep calling you back. Please come back. Please come back. And you come back and you tell them again, like, this is the last year. I can't do it. And they say,
Well, it
come back,
depends,
come
though,
back.
right? Yeah, I find the best way to get rid of a customer is to say, oh yeah, you know, well, your price is going to have to increase by 30%, or price is a great way to allocate resources, but it's kind of interesting, right? So this is the third company we looked at, and the first two companies were both small manufacturers. One was a machining company, and the other was a plastic molder. This one is more of a service business, landscaping. But I think you guys did a great job, kind of like looking at this company, identifying some of the things they could do to kind of like look at their cash flow issue. And I think we kind of agreed that the foundational issue is their receivables and collecting their receivables in a more timely fashion. But if we look at the other two companies, and we look at all three companies and kind of like say, if we were going to summarize what we've kind of identified, or summarize the issues that all three of the companies we've looked at have, it all comes down to, in my mind, and you guys might differ, but in my mind, it all comes down to owners trying to do too much, or not having the time to do everything that's necessary. And the challenge is figuring out how to get all that done, right? Planning takes time, right? And it's a very critical function that deserves the owner's time. But I think what we saw in each of these companies was that the owner was also, or was heavily involved in the day-to-day operations. And when owners are heavily involved in the day-to-day operations, it's kind of hard for them to step back and manage, right? There was a lady I knew. She was developing her business, and she told me that she's trying to get to the point where she spent more time working on her business as opposed to working in her business. And I think we see that, unfortunately, for a lot of small companies, the owners get caught up in working in their business and don't spend enough time working on their business, which is, it's just a reality of small business. I think that the owner gets, falls into that trap. And so I guess one of the lessons, and we've been looking at companies that are 1 million to 4 million revenue range, who have the potential to get to 10 million. And I think one of the things we've seen is that these companies hit a ceiling, right, where they can't seem to get much beyond 3, 4 million, 5 million, even though the market's out there for them. They reach capacity limitations. Machine. I think one of the companies, they had, their machines were the capacity of their individual machines did not allow them to. There was one machine that was creating a bottleneck.
Right.
And so it limited their ability to grow, So all these issues that these small business people have. But, if they were to call either of you and say, hey, I got this problem, I think they might get some insights
Yeah.
into some of the things they might do to achieve their growth goals. So,
Yeah, and honestly, what's a really nice thing about all three of them is that they all show decent earnings. They have reasonable amounts of sales. And despite the flaws, if you start to fix the flaws, they can do a lot of business. There's a lot more money that can be made and a lot of growth that can occur. So there's a lot that can happen to help them. And that's a really good thing to do.
right.
Yeah, and because they are multi-million dollar, revenue earning companies, it's a matter of understanding where you can invest in these changes that need to happen. And I think that that's one of the things that small businesses, they're so busy, slinging the paintbrush or swinging the hammer or clipping the hedges or whatever they're doing. They're in the business of being in their business, and they're not in the business of managing their business, which was the same thing that the young lady that you were talking about, not working in the business, but on the business. It's the same thing. But from a quality perspective, it does take a mind shift. It's a culture change. It's an environmental shift, to be able to stop and say, I'm going to invest, 5,000 or 10,000 or even 100,000 into training, awareness, communication, business development, that culture shift, and really understand what that means. And that's not very easy for a lot of small businesses because they're running so fast. It's hard to make them stop and see what they need to do, like something as simple as that 4-letter word that you've been throwing out, plan.
Yeah, and what you just said about that woman, Sydney, the whole idea of working on a business as opposed to in a business, when you're building the business, you don't think of it that way.
Not at all.
You really worry more about how do I get from point A to point B to just keep it going. Consequently, it is hard to go, I will need to start to work on the business. These are things that, they're really, it's very insightful to say that and to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of the E-Myth. And I think his name was Michael Gerber, wrote the E-Myth Revisited or something. But he suggests that businesses have to adopt the franchise model. And by that, he means that you have to take your business and standardize everything, much like the McDonald's and the Burger Kings and the Wendy's, right? They know how big the hamburger patty is. They know exactly how long it needs to cook on each side. With the French fries, they're cut a certain way. They know exactly how long it needs to be in the grease. They standardize everything. So it's really hard to screw it up, right? And I believe that you need to standardize your business, right? So that when people come in to work in your business, if they follow the manual, they can't go wrong. And they can only follow the manual and not go wrong if the manual standardizes everything, right? All of the major components that go into offering the product or making the product or offering the service, all that has to be standardized, right? And so I find, and I agree with you, BJ, most people, a lot of small business people start out working in the business by necessity. And for me, I think that's okay if your objective is in working in the business to standardize it. And then once it's standardized, to step back and then begin to work on it. Right. So it's kind of interesting. I guess we're running out of time. I want to thank you, BJ and Mercedes, for your insights. I'd like to thank the listening audience too for tuning in. This is 3 Advisors and a Business, where issues and problems common to most small business people are discussed with the hope of offering meaningful solutions. Every small business has the potential to become a big business. Hopefully, listening to us may help you get there. Until next time, this is 3 Advisors in a Business.